Welcome to this virtual tour of the Head Wrightson's Thornaby site, located in a loop of the River Tees, which was previously home to many more industries than Head Wrightson's. Many ex-employees of the company, and indeed Thornaby residents, will be familiar with the site, and this presentation also includes mention of the other companies who work on the site. But first, some quick reminders of the company. The Plum Duff advertising site from King's Cross Station, the HW logo, a nameplate from a coffee pot steam loco and an HW keyring, and a coffee pot steam loco refurbished by apprentices and now at Preston Park Museum. First, a look at how the site is now, comprising the university, a technical college, housing and a business park, criss-crossed with roads named to reflect its present status. The red line is an approximate position for Trafalgar Street, of which we will hear more later. But let's go back in time. The overlaying side shows Head Wrightson's probably at its most prosperous in the 1970s. But let's explore the site from its earliest. This schematic drawing of the works, taken from a 1904 sales catalogue, shows the layout of the works and other adjacent foundries, together with the river, and quite prominent is the factory building towards the top of the picture, of which more later. Whitwell's foundry can be seen to the left of the factory building, and Crosswaite's foundry towards the left-hand side of the photograph, near to the river. A ship can be seen berthed at the Richardson and Ducks Quay. It all looks a little bucolic, with the horse and cart in Trafalgar Street, but in actual fact it will be hard graft in the open air in all weathers, in an environment lacking modern facilities. And perhaps a little licence has been taken with Rosebery Top. This map from around 1900 highlights Stockton High Street and Thornaby Station either side of the River Tees, and the location of the works in a loop of the river. The steel foundry was not built until 1919. Trafalgar Street, shown in red, leading to the river, has houses at either end and the Teesdale works in the middle. The Craig Taylor shipyard, then known as Thornaby Shipbuilding Yard, is highlighted in black, and the Richardson Ducks Yard, then known as the South Stockton Shipyard, in green. Indeed, Thornaby was originally known as South Stockton. This enlargement of that map shows the Head Wrightson site in greater detail, with Trafalgar Street again highlighted in red and the iron foundry adjacent on its right. The area below Mandle Road and bounded by the river on the east was very densely populated, but it was a self-contained area with shops, pubs, a mission hall and a police station. Residents had easy access to Mandle Road, which had a wide range of shops. There was a regular corporation O-bus service between Norton and Middlesbrough, the railway station was close by, and it was an easy walk over the Victoria Bridge into Stockton High Street. Here is a picture taken at the bottom of Trafalgar Street, near to the river, in probably the late 1940s, early 1950s. The sign for the Bradford Vaults pub, along with an advert for Lion's Cake, can be seen at the left in mid-picture. The little boy seated on the steps, perhaps waiting for his dad, or perhaps hoping for a spare sandwich from a worker going home. The area north of Mandle Road, just below the railway line, was densely populated with 2 up and 2 down terraced housing and shops for residents' immediate needs. Mandle Road with nearby Stockton was easily accessible for more general shopping, but this area was well served with pubs, having a total complement of 8. At the entrance to Bridge Street, just off Mandle Road, was the imposing Bridge Hotel, and further along was the Clevelander, the only surviving pub of that area, now renamed the Dubliner. As Bridge Street turns into Trafalgar Street, the commercial pub is on the right, and further down in the shadow of Whitwell's foundry lay the Trafalgar Hotel and the Burton, and almost opposite, at the corner of Trafalgar Street, was the Collingwood, run at one time by Eva Walker, who trained junior dancers for the pantomimes at the Globe Theatre. The Bradford Vaults and the Ship Inn were located at the bottom of Trafalgar Street, near to the river. The Whitwell brothers were Quakers from Kendal, whose close connections to Darlington's Peace family helped them to set up their ironworks in Thornaby in 1859, just to the east of Trafalgar Street, and where they were close neighbours of Head Wrightson's. The foundry was a substantial, profitable concern with 3 blast furnaces and hundreds of employees. But it was a dangerous place too. There were lots of horrific deaths, and in 1877 a James Higgins was consumed in a furnace after he fell in. When it was safe for his colleagues to look for him, not a vestige of the poor fellow was to be recovered. It would be an uncomfortable, noisy and unhealthy place for residents living close by, as fumes were discharged from its furnaces without cleaning or filtration, making the atmosphere most unhealthy. The foundry closed in 1925 with various companies, including Head Wrightson's, buying various options. The buildings were taken over by the Cork Insulation and Asbestos Company in January 1942. Craig Taylor Shipyard and slipways were further upstream, just below the Victoria Bridge and opposite the Stockton riverside. Trafalgar Street is marked in red to help with orientation. Here is a ship being launched from Craig Taylor's slipways, stern first, that is upstream. It is going in backwards, watched by a large crowd on the Stockton side of the river. Note the sailing ships moored at Stockton Quay and the steam tug. This yard opened in 1884 and built and launched 227 ships before closure in 1928, which is part of the shipbuilding industry's attempt to reduce shipbuilding capacity. The owners were compensated, but the employees were left to the dole and means testing. The Craig Taylor office block was an architectural gem in an industrial environment. It housed the steel foundry laboratories, where each batch of melted steel was analysed before being poured into moulds. The steel foundry offices were based in this building. It was a shame to demolish it, but the Teesside Development Corporation said it had to go. Richardson Duck Shipyard was located at the northernmost extremity of the site, just after a bend in the river. Trafalgar Street is shown in red to help with orientation. This yard was founded as the South Stockton Iron Shipbuilding Company in 1852, using premises that were the former yard of engine builders Fossick of Stockton, and their first vessel was the iron-hulled steamship SS Advance. In 1855, Joseph Richardson and George Nixon Duck took over the yard and built 50 iron steamships, a paddle steamer, 10 sailing ships and 29 barges in their first 10 years. In 1919, James and Walter Gould acquired a controlling interest, but in 1922 the yard suffered industrial action and a lack of orders. The final ship, the SS Southborough, was built in 1924, and in May 1925 the Gould Group went into liquidation, and in 1933 the yard was demolished. Head Wrightson utilised the office block and template shop for the McKee division of the Iron and Steel Works of the parent company. This division started in 1945 as a consulting, designing and contracting department dealing with complete iron and steelwork projects from start to finish. Also Head Wrightson's Aluminium Limited, a subsidiary company formed in 1946 for the design and fabrication of all types of aluminium and other light alloy structures, were housed in some of these buildings. Head Wrightson utilised the slipways for launching dock gates and boilers for the Bradwell Nuclear Power Station in Kent. At the top of the picture can be seen the factory building that is highlighted, and more of that later, and Whitwell's iron foundry can be seen belching smoke at the top, and the Union foundry can be seen to the left. The factory building, originally known as the Tees Cotton Factory, later called the Thornaby Cotton Mill, was built in 1839 and first run as a cotton spinning mill by William Smith and the Skinner brothers under the name of the Tees Cotton Company. However, it proved to be a failure and changed hands twice, though most of the time standing idle. It was sold in 1853 with about 30 acres of land from the Thornaby estate to Henry Pease of Darlington, the MP for South Durham, who then sold the factory, as the old mill was later called, with 3 acres of land to Head, Wright and Ashby for £6,600 on January 2, 1860. From that date it had many purposes, the ground floor being occupied by the stampings operation and the machine shops. The upper floors housed the works canteen and the apprentice school. The factory, a huge brick building, was a landmark in the area before half of it was destroyed by fire in 1949. The next pictures show the fire brigade tackling the blaze and the after effects. The building was demolished after the fire, and when removing the debris, 2 dessert plates made at the Wedgwood pottery and an inscribed brass plate were found in the foundations. This photograph depicts the Head Wrightson's works around the 1940s. Trafalgar Street is indicated with the Teesdale Engineering Works on the right, that is the east, and the steel foundry on the left, the west, just out of sight in mid-photo. To the right of Trafalgar Street is the bridge yard or construction shops, and towards the bottom of the picture are the machine and fitting shops, and just below is the factory building. Quite dense housing can be seen at the bottom of the picture, straddling both sides of Trafalgar Street, with the Burton pub to the east and the Collingwood pub almost opposite. The river can be seen at the top of the picture. This aerial photograph from the late 1960s, early 1970s shows the main departments in red. The dense terrace housing between Trafalgar Street and Chapel Street has been demolished and the land purchased by Head Wrightson. The flour mill is at the bottom left-hand corner and Alexander's garage is at the bottom towards the right. The river can be seen in the bottom left-hand corner and towards the top of the photograph. During the Second World War, Head Wrightson's caught the eye of the Germans who produced this map of potential bomb sites. The Head Wrightson site did not receive direct bomb damage, but suffered from the blast effect from the damage from bombs dropped on land to the east. As part of its war effort, Head Wrightson with 3 other companies built over 238 landing craft, helped with the manufacture of the Pluto fuel pipeline and with the Mulberry Harbour structures. The river played a significant part in the life of Heads. A character of the river was Jimmy Kelly, who ran a ferryboat service from Thistle Green near to Stockton Police Station to the bottom of Trafalgar Street. This ferry concession had been in his family from the mid-18th century, and its heyday was during Stockton's shipbuilding period, as it was handy for employees living in Portrack and town areas of Stockton, saving a long walk or a bus ride via Victoria Bridge to the shipyards. It was also handy for a lunchtime trip into Stockton High Street. Jimmy needed to work with the tide when ferrying, and it was a skill to bring the boat to the landing jetties with tides flowing or ebbing. Passengers often had to stand on the ferry at busy times, and when embarking, nimble feet were needed to avoid wet shoes. He was retained by various river frontage companies to keep the river free of debris, which often involved the recovery of dead bodies, which were always brought ashore on the Thornaby side, because the recovery retainer was higher than at the Stockton side. As the ferry work declined, he became an employee of the company in the erection department. The company's successful tender in the 1950s to build boilers for the Bradwell nuclear power station in Kent brought with it a transportation headache, which was solved by the astute use of the Richardson Duck slipways, allowing passage to Kent via the River Tees and the North Sea using a tugboat. This picture shows the first boiler being launched on a Friday afternoon, with most of the workmen in attendance, including our commentator, somewhere at the bottom of the first row, whose youth allowed a quick getaway when the wash from the launch wet a few boots. The slipways were also used for the launch of dock gates, and 6 completed dock gates can be seen lined up ready for launch. And the next picture shows a dock gate just after hitting the water. The Head Wrightson site was virtually landlocked, with only one road in and out of the works, presenting continual challenges for the transportation of large finished products. The river provided one solution, but otherwise it was manoeuvrability. After leaving the works, the biggest challenge was exiting Bridge Road onto either Mandle Road to go south or over the Victoria Bridge north towards Stockton. And this large column is heading south after it has negotiated the sharp corner. Note the Bridge Hotel in the centre of the picture and the flour mill over towards the right. This photo is of a bit of ordinary fabricated stuff heading towards Stockton on perhaps a grey November day. Taken in the late 1960s, the Bridge Hotel is evident and Thornaby Town Hall can be seen in the background. The photo has little artistic merit, but considered Head Wrightson's is no more. There are no shipyards on the river, RCI has gone, as has the steel industry and many more manufacturing companies. But sharp eyes may spot the Rington's tea van towards the left, whose company is still going strong. The next 2 pictures show heavy loads negotiating Yarm Lane Corner in Stockton, with Ross Eye's ice cream parlour and Stockton Castle in the background. Here is a heavy steel casting being strapped down to a low loader wagon ready for transportation out of the works. This is the last major order to leave Head Wrightson's. It is a mega large heat exchanger column bound to RCI at Billingham. It was necessary to remove a lot of street furniture in order to travel to Billingham. It was also a very sad day in 1984 for Head Wrightson. Land to the west of Trafalgar Street, previously known as Thornaby Cars, would be damp, swampy land due to the tidal River Tees. It was used between 1724 and 1839 for horse racing. Head Wrightson's bought this land in 2 parcels, 2.5 acres in 1917 and 6.5 acres in 1918, which together make a steel foundry site. Further purchase of 3 acres to the south and 2 acres of the shipyard site in 1937, together with other property purchased at different times, brought the company's holding to the west of Trafalgar Street to about 26 acres. The Teesdale Steel Foundry, which began its existence in 1919 with the installation of a 3-ton electric arc furnace, which was later complemented by 4 electric furnaces of 8, 5, 3 and 1 tons capacity, and 2 high-frequency induction furnaces for special alloy steels. The foundry buildings are spacious, and castings ranging from a few pounds to 15 tons were produced according to the type of steel required. The capacity is about 9,000 tons of castings per annum in a wide range of steels. In addition to the foundries, fettling yard, pattern shop and erection stores, there is a large sand preparation and reclamation plant, a shot blasting plant and annealing furnaces. This aerial photograph from the late 1970s, early 80s shows the reorganisation of the site to meet the economic requirements of the day. In 1978, the Derby Corporation merged with Head Wrightson's, or as many employees preferred to say, took over Head Wrightson's. Also in that year, the Lazard scheme was introduced, designed to reduce the number of steel foundries in the country, and in 1983 the Head Wrightson Steel Foundry closed. The engineering division, Head Wrightson's Teesside, underwent major restructuring to meet the challenging economic criteria of the day. A new machine shop was built on the east side of the bridge yard, which accommodated a number of heavy machines, and new heavy rolling equipment was installed in the bridge yard, and welding technology was always the most up to date. The old machine shop, fitting shop, tool room and template shop were all accommodated within the bridge yard, and their former buildings demolished, leaving the site south of the bridge yard empty. Stockton Castlegate's shopping centre can be seen towards the extreme left, and the river, still tidal, starts to reflect its new life, with many pleasure boats moored. This is the last aerial view of this famous manufacturing loop in the River Tees, bringing to an end almost 150 years of varied engineering expertise. During World War II, the company had its own Home Guard platoon and a fire brigade. The Home Guard platoon was disbanded when danger of invasion faded, but the fire brigade remained operational into the 1960s. A number of Head Wrightson stalwarts can be seen in this photograph, including Harry Soppert, Sid Duckett, Billy Wallace, Tommy Harper, Arthur Jackson, Charles and Dave Littlewood, and Alf Wayton. And near to the steel foundry office there was a reservoir storing water for emergencies. The Head Wrightson's fire engine is now housed at Preston Park. The Cleveland Company's flour mill silo dominated the skyline for 60 years, but in June 1970 plans were set in place for its demolition. Over a week, explosive charges were set in place designed to collapse the building onto derelict land, avoiding rivers and roads. With the Victoria Bridge and adjacent roads closed and hundreds of spectators, the Big Bang only managed to wound the building, leaving it at an angle to the ground. Another blast the following day failed, and it was days before the giant was felled. In addition to its female office staff, quite a number of women were employed in the works, particularly during wartime. The number gradually reduced, but in the 1960s there was still a lady crane driver in the steel foundry. Also, the core floor in the steel foundry was all female, and proved to be a rather hazardous place for green-eyed, unsuspecting apprentices. The bridge yard employed female platers helpers, and here one can be seen on top of this big construction. And the machine shop had a squad of ladies working turret lathes, but this is not a Head Wrightson's picture. Head Wrightson was an industry leader and well known for its apprentice training. The apprentice school was housed in the three-storey building shown adjacent to the canteen. The top floor was a classroom, the middle floor a machine shop, and the bottom floor was another workshop. In the mid-1950s, the company received around 600 applications per year for 60 placements across the wide range of trades available at the company's 6 Teesside sites. The successful 60 were split into 4 house groups, who each had to spend a day in the apprentice school, writing up about the previous week's work and being taught theory and learning some general practical skills. The day started at 8 o'clock with PT on the apprentice school roof, regardless of the weather and often shirtless. Being close to the steel foundry fettling yard, fettling dust inevitably settled on the roof, and when it rained, pools of water gathered, which mixed with this dust left us rather dirty. Thankfully there were showers, and we were allowed a breakfast visit to the canteen for a bacon butty and a coffee before the classroom work. This picture is of the 1960s apprentice school intake. The photograph is taken on the steps of the cricket pavilion at Head Wrightson Sports Park. Each week we visited a different part of the works, including the outlying subsidiary companies, to get a real flavour of the company's range of products and trades. When apprenticeship vacancies became available, these were offered to apprentices who had expressed an interest for that particular trade, and they then left the school. At 4:30 each Friday we all assembled in the apprentice school to be paid and given any information and to check on where we were the next week or being ticked off or whatever. You were expected to continue with further education, and day release classes were available, which also usually entailed 2 evening classes. Towards Christmas, the company chairman Sir John Wrightson held shooting parties on his estate on a Saturday and requested volunteers from the apprentice school to act as beaters. There was always volunteers. The pick-up point was near to Stockton Town Hall, and the works canteen provided a packed lunch. It was not all work. Head Wrightson had extensive sports fields for recreational opportunities, including 2 football pitches, a cricket field, 2 tennis courts, and a bowling green good enough to host county matches. Interdepartmental competitions were held in the respective seasons, which were opportunities for all employees to be involved. In the 1970s there was also table tennis, darts, an air rifle club, an angling club, a swimming section, a brass band, and a saloon orchestra. Other groups included a drama society, a camera club, a colour film group, and the senior staff guild. There was an old age pensioners outing, Christmas pantomime visits for employees' children, a fruit and vegetable show, and also a social club. In November 1893, Thomas Wrightson was central to erecting the library in George Street, which had a general reading room, a ladies' room, and a reference section. In 1953, the company gifted the mayor's robes when an employee, John Scott, was elected Thornaby's mayor. This photograph shows Mr. Scott being congratulated by Richard Miles, Head Wrightson's chairman, watched by Albert Stockwell, Thornaby town clerk in his regalia, and Sir John and Mr. Peter Wrightson. Another employee, Walter Wood, held that office in 1964. Two Prime Ministers visited the works. Harold Macmillan in March 1959, when he had lunch in the works canteen with members of the Works Council. Mr. Peter Wrightson can be seen at the back on the left, Sir John Wrightson at the front on the right, and Frank Shepherd, Personnel Manager, extreme right. Margaret Thatcher, Conservative Prime Minister, visited the site in the late 1980s after ITM had taken over the site and closed it. Their logo can be seen in the top right hand corner. The present site arose from that visit. In the 1960s, Thornaby redeveloped itself from the dense terrace street houses in and around Mandale Road and George Street into a new shopping and housing area on the old airfield site with high-rise, spaced-out housing, modern shops and a large car park. The council commissioned a sculpture depicting the old low-rise buildings and the new high-rise development. Head Wrightson's fabricated the sculpture, which was originally installed in the car park of the new shopping centre, but is now located on a roundabout at the entrance to the town centre. This slide shows the traditional names of the streets in this area, some reflecting famous battles and others relating to a connection to the area. This slide shows the names chosen for the new road layouts on the Teesdale site. However, what a wonderful opportunity was missed in not paying homage to this area's proud history, and how much more fitting it would have been to have reflected the area's industrial contribution to Thornaby and nearby Stockton by naming some of the new roads with names that reflect its glorious industrial heritage.